These 5 things I know are true. And yes, I know I haven't done one of these things in 2 weeks. 2. I am from the state in which the WWE champion is from. Yay! 3. WrestleMania just got a whole lot more interesting. 4. Rainbow Dash is no longer your champion. And 5. Sometimes wrestling is goofy, and sometimes wrestling is bullshit. I'm Nirvana Spark. Well, it's been 2 weeks, so let's play some catch up. After Elimination Chamber, we've not only had one, but we've had 2 brand new WWE champions. The Miz first for a week solid, and our new champion, Bobby Lashley. Now, if this puts a smile on my face, it absolutely does for 2 reasons. 1. Bobby Lashley is from my home state of Colorado. In fact, my former hometown. 2. Having The Miz finally get rid of the Money in the Bank briefcase finally allows me to no longer think about it until they start screwing it up again in June when they don't give it to an NXTer to help build credibility. But since we last did a goofy wrestling episode, rumors are about that NXT is moving to Tuesdays, which makes that whole credibility thing that they need to gain stupidly mute. But here's the main reason why NXT is moving to Tuesdays. It's not because WWE wants to give up the fight. It's because NBCSN, the sports network of NBC Sports, in which USA's parent company, NBC Universal, also owns, is going away in the fall. Which means NHL games and soccer games are going to need a place to be at. Guess where it's going to land? USA. Yes, Wednesday Night Hockey on USA is coming soon. Yes, this is not an official confirmation from USA, but bank on it. In fact, bank on it sooner than you think. April 13th, if the rumors are true. But it's funny. NXT needed to move away from Wednesday. The two shows were cannibalizing each other completely and totally. And now AEW runs unopposed on Wednesday nights, which probably means they'll finally hit that magic million viewers they've always been chasing. But 2, this allows NXT to be back in its own pocket again, back on its original night, by the by, to finally not have to worry about the competition they're fighting against, making it good for both sides. Sometimes wrestling is better when we have a truce going around. Other than that, Roman Reigns is still wreaking havoc on SmackDown. Seth Rollins and Cesaro are about to have a WrestleMania feud that hopefully push Cesaro into the main event. Pretty much Bray Wyatt is Xana from Code Lyoko, because now he's learned specters and body possession. That whole thing just keeps getting better and goofier, which puts a smile on my grill. The women's division is utter trash, except for the one match we could have all predicted: Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair at Mania. And essentially the Undisputed Era is, for at least now, until the main roster, and the main roster needs more money, gone for a minute. All in all, All in all, WWE over the last 2 weeks has changed a lot and yet changed little. Which leads straight into Throne Room segments. That's right, segments. I'm catching you up with two big Throne Room speeches. And the first one goes out to my man, the Titantron. The Titantron Podcast, once again, echoes itself into goofy wrestling bullshit. In fact, it was his video that motivated me to finally pull the trigger on goofy wrestling bullshit to begin with through his WrestleMania fantasy book. But again, he finds himself in the throne room because last week on his show, he talked about the definition of underrated in wrestling and how it's being used wrong. I watched the video hoping and praying that I'd have something to argue with him about. That he would finally say something I disagreed with. Thankfully for me, the answer is no. In fact, his definition of underrated is perfect. But I wouldn't even use the word underrated or even underutilized or even underappreciated. I tend to use the term that these wrestlers are what they are in a real sports sense. Remember, WWE has this fantasy in its head that it wants to be like a real sport when it's not. So, I'm going to use a real sports term to bounce off the Titantron and give it a more appropriate term. Utilitarian. Yep, all these guys. Cesaro, Andrade, Aleister Black, before his wife decided to use the U word that you don't use in wrestling circles. All these guys that you think are not being utilized in proper spots, given titles, everybody. If Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard are to be viewed as owners of a baseball team, manager, and owner, then to Bruce Pritchard, these wrestlers are utility players. Only meant to make the real big players win the game in a tough spot, to give them temporary rivals with no direction. They're utility players, pitch hitters, people that you might ever see every now and again finally get some TV time, and maybe one of the utility players, because of injury or because they go on a hitting streak when they're pitch hitting, gets added to the main lineup to add some variety and some pitcher confusion in the batter's box. Wrestling is using this technique with its roster, when the main problem with the WWE, especially on Monday and Friday nights, is the brand split on its own. It's not that the WWE has too many wrestlers and can't fill the spots. No, it's that they have too few stars, and even with a brand split, can't fill the spots. Even the YouTube channel Dave Knows Wrestling did a recent video highlighting just these facts on the failure of the brand split and why it doesn't work, giving you concrete numbers as to why that totally is. The brand split has been another failure since its reinstitutionalization in 2017. The only reason it worked back in 2002 is because the rosters back then were stacked with Edge, the late Eddie Guerrero, who, as of this video's recording and upload, we're unfortunately celebrating his death today. Among others, the roster was probably the most singly youthful and singly most star-stacked roster since the Attitude Era. Now, would a brand split work if you were to transplant the Attitude Era wrestlers into the modern day? Absolutely. Why? Because star power. Why is Bad Bunny getting a match? Why is Bow Wow getting the call? And why is Soulja Boy Tellum, a guy who makes fake video game consoles and only has one real hit to his name, getting into a beef with a Randy Orton, creating more wrestling attention than anything that's going on TV? Star power. That's what the WWE is lacking. They're lacking true star power. They only have 6 real stars on the roster. 7 if you want to call Drew McIntyre one of them. The other 6, for your notion, the aforementioned Bray Wyatt, Brock Lesnar, Daniel Bryan, Roman Reigns, due to his new gimmick, Damian Priest through way of Bad Bunny, and now the aforementioned Randy Orton and Edge. So 8, okay? That's just on the male side. You only have 2 real stars, 3 on the female side. Sasha Banks, Asuka, and Charlotte. Bianca Belair I won't throw into that list because she is yet to prove herself on the main stage. That's what WrestleMania is for. But yes, Titantron, your take last week, absolutely correct. No disagreements. We are already and should be great friends if you keep producing takes like this one. And you and I keep inspiring each other, don't we? But that was me being the nice take. Now it's on to the mean take, the second take. The take might be a hot one. Here it pretty much is. And it bounces back on the previous Throne Room take from earlier. The reason why the WWE titles don't mean as much and that Bobby Lashley's win is a shock is because not only does the title itself look ugly, but by way of the title looking ugly, the company does too. And thanks to the internet, it just gets worse. The take? WWE should leave social media now. Not only because of the old historical points of kayfabe and maintaining kayfabe, which is all true, but it's because the internet wrestling fan, the wrestling fan in general, no longer knows how to interact with decorum, and neither do the wrestlers themselves. The reason why wrestling has become so classless in the way that it books and classless in the way that it acts by some on the roster is because the internet itself is classless and the WWE tries to bow to its every whim. The WWE lives in fear of the internet. It lives in fear of the reaction. Instead of a company that lived and thrived off of reaction as its main lifeblood through crowds, ticket prices, and merch sales, now the WWE lives in fear of the reaction. They live in fear of not only the positive one, they live in fear of the negative one. Negative reactions will make sure that they quick book themselves out of problems, things that they're unprepared for. See every storyline left on a vine in 2020 that isn't being brought up in 2021. But also, they live in fear of success. Why? Because if a wrestler succeeds due to the internet picking them up when they're not scheduled to succeed, the WWE has one of two choices. Go with their own path that will bring about the aforementioned backlash earlier, or quickly pivot to make use of the success. In other words, I call it the golden train. The golden train only appears every once in a while. The golden train is meant to pick up the one that is meant to be the torchbearer. But in the internet world of wrestling, there is no torch. The torch doesn't exist. The torch is more like a hand grenade with the pin pull. At any time, the hand grenade will explode. You just have to hope it doesn't explode with your chosen wrestler holding the grenade. If you're a video game lover, in the recent opening cinematic for the game Far Cry 6, the main villain of the game, the son of the father being spoken to, is handed a live grenade with the pin pull and asked not to drop it. This is what the WWE does every time they have a social media post. Every time they tell us a match in advance. Every time they even do something involved with the internet in some way, they're putting that grenade with a pin inside it into their hand and hoping their wrestlers or their fighters or their bookers don't drop it. So many times they've dropped it to the detriment of their own explosion. Trust me, the WWE should be looking like a barren wasteland filled with tumbleweeds and a red sky, with nothing but Vince's table at the center as a dead, decrepit corpse. But it's not the WWE's fault. It's the fans' fault. The fans are the ones that pull the pin in the grenade and ask the company not to drop it when they're not capable of not dropping it. Why? Because here you are, internet fans, telling them not to drop it, while also simultaneously changing the grenade right when they were asked to hold it. So the previous grenade explodes in the prospect of the new grenade that is being handed to them. Wrestling is supposed to be a two-way street. The company is supposed to tell you what the direction is, and if it works appropriately, the loop gets fans excited, fans engaged, fans watch, new storyline swaps. That's the loop. The internet, by virtue of its existence and the virtue of spoilers, ruins this routine. I am a man of solutions. And I'm going to challenge the internet and anyone brave enough to take me up on it. It's called Mics Down. What is the Mics Down challenge? For 1 month, do not react, do not speak of, do not respond to anything that the WWE does in any form or fashion. Positively, negatively, doesn't matter. For 1 solid month, watch wrestling as a fan. Turn off social media. Turn off your microphones. And watch as a fan for 1 month. After that 1 month, write down everything that you saw positively and negatively without being influenced by the internet. And using that pro and con list, make a video about it. 1 video about it. If you've still come out with more negatives than positives, it's for 2 reasons. Either 1, the internet has influenced your personality so much that you can't not think in the way that it does, or 2, that you genuinely feel that way. If it comes out negatively, come to terms with that, and comes out with terms of why. If it turned out positively, do the same thing. Oftentimes, our favorite entertainment properties or favorite kinds of entertainment can be ruined by outside influences. The biggest one is the internet itself. My opinions are not influenced by the internet. It's more of a boomerang reaction to them. I find most wrestling podcasts on the internet, sans a handful, comical, jokeable, dumb, vague, and monotonous. With the same mindset and the same stupidity therein and thereout. With a lack of education and a lack of care. Perhaps the problem with the internet wrestling community is that we're all Icaruses. We fly too close to the sun. But we live in the sun and don't disconnect. It's time to disconnect from the discourse and start to reconnect with the things we love about wrestling. Why we love it. Why we, as a person, started watching it. Not through the influences of other people, but looking deep down in our souls and finding out how our wrestling souls are crafted. My wrestling soul is crafted from the expert technicians like Bob Backlund and Bret Hart. By tag teams like the Legion of Doom and Demolition. By the great character work of Mr. Perfect, or even more silly ones like the Mountie. That's what crafts my wrestling soul. And it's a wrestling soul that I still live with, even in 2021. That's why I, unlike most wrestling shows on the internet, not only can live with Raw being 3 hours, I'm the guy that is willing to say it point blank. I enjoy Raw as a 3-hour show. And no, you're not changing my mind. I enjoy Monday Night Raw. I enjoy SmackDown. I enjoy NXT. I don't enjoy AEW. Why? Because I don't want these wrestlers to die in their mid-40s after taking way too many table bumps. I know how this story's going to end for this brand, and it's not gonna make the AEW faithful happy. Because I've seen it on my side of the coin. It never ends well. The WWE is the most technically gifted company that it's ever been ever before. It literally plays to my type of wrestler. All except for one thing, the lack of character. But in some cases, like Bray Wyatt and Alexa Bliss, or the Apollo Crews character, who is now the wrestling equivalent of the Nigerian email scammer. Or even R-Truth or Damian Priest and Bad Bunny. Or even The Miz. There is character in this company, just not as much as there should be. But I think too many of our wrestling opinions are influenced by or because of others. The reason why the WWE has trouble booking or writing or any multitude of their problems is they're trying too hard and failing to live vicariously through the fans. Don't. You are like Rick Stern from Code Lyoko. Right now, WWE, you have a commitment problem. And it's not a commitment to the fans. It's a commitment to yourself. You need to put the social media down and recommit to yourself. Find the spirit and find the swagger that carried you all through the 90s and the 2000s. Because that's the WWE that people actually want. But because of the internet, you've lost the swagger. You've taken too many beatings. It's time to log off. And it's time to start thinking again. And the wrestling fans need to do the exact same thing. Log off and enjoy. And even after the month, if you still feel the way you do, tell me. Tell anybody. I'm a big man. I can take the heat. I've been doing internet for the last 11 years. Tell me why I should hate the company that has been the one constant in my life since the age of 3. Tell me why I should be against them when they are one of the few people and few things that have always made me happy, no matter what condition it is in. Because as I was struggling through school, struggling to make friends, and even struggling to make an internet identity, the WWE has always been there. And eternally, I will always be thankful for it. It might be goofy wrestling bullshit, but that's why I enjoy doing this show every week. Because it is exactly that. It's the same product that I fell in love with when I was 3 years old. Watching it with my grandma and my father. Almost too much like it. And yes, there are some head scratchers, but head scratching, yes, but still enjoyable. I always put the mic down, even if the mic is eternally going on in my head. I still turn it off because, not because I feel pity for them. In fact, I do. It's that I feel pity for us. Pity for wrestling fans and how low we've come. How low we've stooped. Turning a war between two shows that aren't even warring with each other. About picking sides of what wrestling organizations we watch and why. In the end, we should all put our mics down and acknowledge we are wrestling fans and we are goofy. And the sport we watch is, in fact, for more often than not, no matter what company you watch, bullshit. But it's our bullshit. And it's about time we stopped listening to the masses and started reconnecting with ourselves. It won't make the WWE any better, but maybe, just maybe, it might make it bearable enough where we can see it get there. Because wrestling changed because the fan changed. But now, the fan changes too often. We need to slow down. It's not the WWE that needs to catch up. And that's goofy wrestling bullshit for this week. Tell me what you thought about the two throne rooms this week. And your feelings on Bobby Lashley being a world champion. I'd like to see him down in the comment section below. And until next week, which I swear it will be on the Saturday that it's supposed to, I'm Nirvana Sparkle. Find peace in your own nirvana. Thanks for watching.